Welcome to my channel.
And this is English Podcast Station.
All right, so you know that feeling, right? Like when you even just think about the IELTS speaking test and you get that little knot in your stomach, your palms maybe get a little bit sweaty.
Yeah.
It's something that I think a lot of people who are listening probably know exactly what we're talking about.
I think so.
And it's because it can feel like such a high pressure situation, you know?
Absolutely.
So we're going to tackle this head on today on the deep dive and think of this as like your shortcut to taking control and actually walking into that test feeling genuinely confident.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that shortcut idea because I think that's exactly what we need sometimes. Yeah. You know, we get so overwhelmed by the IELTS. And so today we're going to deep dive into how to remain calm and focused during the IELTS speaking test.
Yes.
And we're going to keep beginners especially in mind.
Okay.
And our guides for this exploration are going to be the fantastic insights shared by James and Erica, the hosts of the English Learning Podcast for Beginners. And they have some really practical advice on this.
Yeah, and I think our goal here is to just give you some concrete techniques that you can use so that when you're done listening to this, you know exactly how to handle those nerves that you might have and how to really show what you can do, you know, in that test.
I think that's such a great goal. And you touched on this before, but it's so important to remember that being calm and focused isn't just like a nice to have. It's actually a key to getting a better score.
Right.
Because when you're relaxed, you can really concentrate, your thoughts are clearer, you can express yourself more fluently, and you can actually connect with the examiner.
Yeah, and I think one of the things about the IELTS speaking test that makes it feel maybe like we're facing this really big challenge is just like the format itself, right?
Yeah, what is it about this format that's so intimidating?
Yeah, and so, you know, it's interesting that, you know, James and Erica point out that it's that direct face-to-face nature of the test, right?
Right.
So unlike a written exam, you know, where you're just interacting with a page here, you're actually talking to another person, and that immediately adds a layer of pressure.
Yeah.
They're being watched.
Yeah, and then the time limits.
Oh, yeah.
Right, so knowing that you only have a certain amount of time to speak, to be assessed, that can really feel like you're racing against the clock.
Totally. And I think that leads to a lot of anxiety for people.
Yeah, for sure. And then also the formal setting, right? So it is an official evaluation.
Oh, yeah.
And that formality can definitely make us feel more on edge.
It's like you're on stage performing or something.
Exactly. Yeah. And if we look at, you know, the test is structured in a way, you know, that there's part one where it's the initial questions, then there's part two where you speak on your own for 2 minutes, and then there's part three with these more abstract discussions.
Right.
Do you think that each of these parts might kind of have its own triggers for anxiety?
I think so. I think in part one, like that initial interaction can be surprisingly nerve-wracking because, as James and Erica point out, it's the very first impression.
Right.
And that can feel like a lot of pressure to get things going. Yeah. And then, of course, you move into part two, the individual long turn, and like just the idea of speaking for 2 minutes uninterrupted can feel like a huge challenge for some people.
It feels like a really long time when you're sitting there and it's just you talking.
And you only get 1 minute to prepare.
Yeah.
And what if you get a topic that you're really not familiar with, you know?
Oh, yeah. That could be a nightmare.
And then part three, you know, with those more in-depth and sometimes abstract questions, you know, that can also be a source of anxiety because it's like, okay, do I really understand what they're asking?
Right.
And can I even express these, you know, more complex ideas?
Yeah. Can I sound intelligent while I'm doing it?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so I think that it's good to kind of break it down that way and think about, you know, each part as having maybe its own triggers. But what are some of those common thoughts and feelings, you know, that people experience that really make that anxiety take hold?
Yeah. I think this raises a really good point about what specific things trigger those anxious feelings.
Right.
And James and Erica talk about a few key ones that are really common. The fear of making mistakes is huge.
Oh, for sure.
Like the fear of using incorrect grammar or saying the wrong word and just sounding unintelligent in front of the examiner.
Yeah.
You know, and then there's the general pressure to do well. To achieve a certain score. And, you know, we all know how important that score can be.
Absolutely.
And then there's the time limits in each part of the test.
Right.
Which make people feel rushed and constantly under pressure. And then there's the possibility of getting topics that you're not familiar with.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a major source of uncertainty and worry.
Yeah.
You know?
It's like, what if I get something that I've never even thought about before?
Right, exactly. And then, of course, just having the examiner there in that formal setting really adds to the feeling of being watched and judged.
Oh, yeah.
And then for some people, lack of confidence or those negative thoughts that we tell ourselves.
Right.
Things like, I'm not good enough, or I'm going to mess up. These can really make the anxiety so much worse. And finally, as James and Erica point out, if you've had a bad experience with the test before,
right,
that memory can definitely create anxiety for future attempts.
Yeah, it's easy to get stuck in that cycle, if you've had a bad experience before.
Yeah, for sure.
So it really is like this perfect storm of all these different potential stressors.
Totally.
But what's going on in our bodies, like biologically, when we're feeling all of this anxiety?
This is where it gets really interesting, because our body has a natural reaction to what it perceives as a threat.
Okay.
Right. So even though the IELTS speaking test isn't like a physical danger,
right,
our brains can still interpret all of that pressure as something stressful.
Right.
And that triggers the release of stress hormones.
Okay.
Mainly adrenaline and cortisol.
So it's like our body is getting ready to, fight or flight.
Yeah.
Even though we're just trying to talk about, our hobbies or something.
It's like we're facing a tiger.
Yeah.
And instead we're facing an examiner.
Right.
And, these hormones can be really helpful in an actual emergency situation.
Right.
But they can actually make it harder for us to perform well in a test situation.
Yeah.
Because, as James and Erica explained, stress can really affect our prefrontal cortex. Which is like the control center for our thoughts.
Yeah.
Right. Especially those complex thoughts that you need for recalling vocabulary, putting sentences together and organizing your ideas logically.
Yeah.
So that's why when you're feeling really anxious, you might suddenly go blank.
Right.
Or feel like your words are all jumbled up.
Yeah, it's like your brain just kind of freezes.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the stress is blocking all the good stuff.
Yeah. And you mentioned negative self-talk earlier.
Yeah.
So how much of an impact do you think that really had?
Well, it had a huge impact.
Okay.
Because as Erica highlights those negative conversations that we have with ourselves,
right,
things like, I'm going to fail or I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
These can really amplify our anxiety, and they can actually become self-fulfilling prophecies.
Right.
Because if you constantly tell yourself that you're going to do poorly, it can really affect your mindset and ultimately your performance.
Yeah. And it's like a negative cycle, right? So you feel anxious and then you have these negative thoughts.
Exactly.
And then those negative thoughts just make you feel even more anxious.
And then you freeze up and then you actually do poorly.
Right. And then it just keeps going and going and going.
And then you have a bad memory of it.
Yeah, exactly.
And it just continues.
So this is why it's so important, as James and Erica point out, to kind of recognize your own personal stress signals, right?
Yes.
Because everybody experiences stress a little bit differently.
Right, like what are your tells?
Exactly, yeah.
What are the things that let you know that you're stressed out?
Yeah, so for some people it might be really physical, right? So they might start sweating or their heart might start beating faster.
Yeah, or you get shaky.
Yeah.
Like your hands are shaking.
Right, or your voice even. But for other people it might be more psychological, right? So they might just feel more irritable or they might have trouble focusing.
Absolutely.
But being aware of those early warning signs is really the first step to being able to actually take control.
Yeah, I love that.
Right.
Because we can learn to manage that.
Okay, so now that we kind of understand why we're feeling this way,
right,
like why our palms are sweating just thinking about the test.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some practical stuff. Like, what are some things that we can actually do before we even walk into that testing room?
I'm so glad you asked that, because James and Erica offer so many practical strategies for building a calm approach before the test.
Okay.
And a key part of this is really building your confidence through consistent practice.
Okay.
Like the more familiar you are with the test format,
right,
and the types of questions that they might ask you, the less intimidating it's going to feel.
It's like practicing for anything, right? Like the more you practice, the better you get at it and the more comfortable you feel.
Exactly.
And the less scary it is.
Yeah.
So what kind of practice should we be doing?
Well, as they suggest, it really starts with getting familiar with those common IELTS topics.
Okay.
And you can find lists of these online and in preparation books.
Okay.
But what's really crucial is to actually practice speaking about those topics out loud.
Okay.
And a really valuable tip that they give is to actually record yourself.
Okay.
Which might feel a bit weird at first, but it really gives you that objective view of areas where you can improve.
Yeah.
Whether it's your smoothness of speaking, your pronunciation, or how clearly your ideas are connected.
Yeah, because sometimes I think what we think we sound like in our heads is not how we actually sound when we're speaking out loud.
It's so true.
Yeah.
I think about this all the time when I hear recordings of myself. I'm like, oh my gosh, do I really sound like that?
Totally. Yeah. And so James and Erica really emphasize developing fluency and coherence. And so, fluency doesn't mean speaking incredibly fast.
Right.
It means speaking at a comfortable pace with natural pauses.
Right.
Rather than these like long silences where you're searching for the right word.
Where you're like,
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
And coherence basically means that your ideas flow logically and are connected to each other.
Okay.
And what's really encouraging is they reassure listeners that the examiners are more interested in your ability to communicate effectively
Right.
than focusing on little tiny grammatical errors.
So it's more about getting your message across.
Totally.
Clearly. Yeah, just being able to express yourself.
Yeah, in a way that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about improving our language skills? Like,
Yeah.
what can we do there?
So they definitely recommend working on expanding your vocabulary and your understanding of grammar.
Okay.
And you can use dictionaries, thesauruses, grammar books. All of these can help you express yourself more precisely and with more confidence.
And a big one that they emphasize is taking those full mock tests
Okay.
under timed conditions
Right.
to really get used to that time pressure.
So it's like a practice run.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's like you're at the track and you're doing a practice run before the big race.
Exactly.
And it helps you get those nerves out too.
Yeah. And then what about after the mock test?
So this is another key point that they make.
Okay.
That the learning doesn't stop there.
Yeah.
You really want to look at your performance and identify any weaknesses.
Okay.
Like, where did you struggle?
Right.
What types of questions were more difficult for you?
Okay.
Because that can help you focus your future practice more effectively.
So it's all about that reflection.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about the mental side of things a little bit.
Yeah.
Because, they mentioned visualization and positive affirmations.
Right.
So how do those actually work?
So these are really powerful tools that you can use to mentally prepare, and visualization basically involves creating this clear mental picture of yourself succeeding in the test.
Right.
So you're speaking smoothly and confidently, you're interacting well with the examiner.
So you're picturing a positive outcome.
Exactly.
Okay.
And positive affirmations are basically encouraging statements that you repeat to yourself.
Okay.
Like, I am confident, I am prepared.
So you're kind of overriding those negative thoughts.
Exactly. You're replacing them with positive ones.
Okay, so you're training your mind to expect a positive outcome.
Right.
I like that.
So instead of expecting failure, you're expecting success.
And what about our physical well-being? Do you think that plays a role?
Oh, absolutely.
James and Erica actually really emphasize how important it is to take care of your physical health in the lead up to the test.
Okay.
Things like getting enough sleep,
Right.
eating healthy meals, and getting regular exercise all contribute to your overall well-being and your ability to handle stress. Because if your body is tired and stressed out, it's going to be a lot harder to get your mind to calm down.
Totally.
So what about staying organized during our prep?
Yeah, they really recommend creating a study schedule and sticking to it.
Okay.
And that can help you stay organized, manage your time effectively, and keep up your motivation.
Okay.
And another good tip is to find a study partner or join a study group for some extra support and encouragement.
It's good to have that accountability too.
Yeah, exactly. And then a simple but crucial piece of advice.
Yeah.
Remember to take breaks.
Oh, yeah.
Don't try to study for hours and hours without any rest.
Right.
Because that can lead to burnout.
Right.
And then finally, set achievable goals.
Okay.
And celebrate your progress along the way.
Right.
To keep those motivation levels high.
I like that. Yeah.
It's all about staying positive.
Okay, so let's go back to mindset management for a second, because we kind of touched on it earlier. But are there any other specific techniques that we can use, especially, in the days and hours leading up to the test?
Yes, definitely. So just to reiterate those key tools that we talked about.
Okay.
Visualization.
Right.
Where you're picturing yourself being successful in the test.
Yeah.
And positive affirmations.
Yeah.
Those encouraging statements that you repeat to yourself.
Okay.
But James and Erica also talk about mindfulness.
Okay.
Which is basically training yourself to focus on the present moment without judgment.
Okay, so being present.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
And even simple exercises like paying attention to your breath for a few minutes can really help calm your nervous system.
Okay.
So instead of worrying about past mistakes or what might happen in the future, you're just bringing yourself back to that present moment.
Okay.
And they also mention progressive muscle relaxation as a technique for managing physical tension, which involves tensing and then releasing different muscle groups in your body. And that can really help reduce those feelings of stress.
Okay.
And then, as talked about before, being aware of your own personal stress signals is key.
Right.
Because once you recognize those early signs of anxiety, you can then use these techniques
Yeah.
to help yourself calm down.
So you have all these tools you can reach for.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like you're building a toolkit
Exactly.
to manage your stress.
And I think for beginners especially, just understanding the format of the test can be kind of its own challenge.
Oh, yeah.
So how can that help with anxiety?
This is a really good point because, as James and Erica remind us, knowing exactly what to expect
Okay.
in each of the 3 parts of the test
Yeah.
can really reduce the fear of the unknown.
Okay.
So when you understand, part 1 is the initial interview questions.
Right.
Part 2 is where you have your long turn and you get the cue card.
Right.
And part 3 is the more in-depth discussion.
Yeah.
When you understand the structure,
Yeah.
the time limits,
Yeah.
the types of questions you might encounter,
Yeah.
you can prepare much more effectively.
Right.
And feel more in control.
And that all leads to less anxiety.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like you're taking the mystery out of it.
Exactly.
So the more familiar you are with what's going to happen,
Yeah.
the less scary it's going to feel.
Right. And then you can focus on preparing your English speaking skills.
Exactly.
Rather than being worried about, oh my God, what is the format going to be,
Right.
Yeah.
What curveballs are they going to throw at me?
Exactly.
I hate those curveballs.
All right. So this has been super helpful. I feel like we've really broken this down.
I hope so.
So just to recap those main points.
Yes, please.
So staying calm and focused, it's really crucial.
It's essential.
Right. And so, anxiety has specific triggers, and it can really prevent us from thinking clearly and communicating effectively.
Yeah. You freeze up.
Yeah. But the good news is that there are things that we can do.
Oh, yeah. Lots of things.
Like practicing regularly, getting familiar with those common topics that they might ask about.
Yes. Get those topic lists.
Yes. Practice speaking out loud.
Record yourself.
Yes. Record yourself.
Yeah.
Even though it might feel a little bit awkward at first.
It's so helpful.
Do those mock tests
Right.
and, learn and use those mindset management techniques.
Yeah. Build your toolkit.
Yes.
You're going to feel so much better prepared.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one thought.
Okay.
I want you to think about what is the one thing that makes you the most anxious about the IELTS speaking test.
Yeah.
Is it the time limit?
Yeah.
Is it the thought of getting a topic that you're not familiar with?
Or the examiner's staring at you.
Yeah, right.
Likely.
Or is it something else entirely?
Yeah. What is it?
And then once you've identified that, what is one technique that we talked about today that you can start using to address that?
I love that.
Yeah, so maybe it's practicing speaking about those common topics out loud, or maybe it's, trying a short mindfulness exercise.
Yeah.
But just pick one and start doing it consistently.
Yes, consistency is key.
Because even those small, regular efforts can really make a big difference in how confident you feel and how well you perform.
You got this.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It was a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.